Imagine waking up to birds and grape leaves. And then, seeing your HOA president pointing at your family vineyard while cops march down your driveway like it's a crime scene. What would you do if your HOA tried to bulldoze your livelihood over a petty grudge? Would you fight? Or would you fold? I'm Marcus. But everybody around here calls me Mark. 3 years back, I traded billable hours for muddy boots. I'd been a corporate attorney in San Francisco. The kind who argued over commas in contracts that were thicker than phone books. Then, my marriage cracked like old plaster. And the settlement emptied my accounts faster than a Vegas slot. I packed up what little pride I had left and drove to Solstice Valley to take over my late grandfather's vineyard, the place where I learned to prune vines before I learned to parallel park. The farmhouse is creaky. The floors complain. And my German shepherd, Bear, treats every delivery van like it owes him money. But the morning's here, man. Mist curling low over rows of grapevines. The air smelling like earth and possibility. It felt like starting over without having to say the words out loud. The trouble wore heels, and a smile that could cut glass. Karen Hartwell, HOA president. Self-anointed queen of Solstice Heights. And a walking lesson in why unchecked power turns decent neighborhoods into petty kingdoms. Her husband, Preston, builds those identical beige fortresses that look like they were copy-pasted from a brochure. She drives a pearl-white SUV that's never touched a dirt road. You know the type. It started with a fence. I replaced a run of old, splintered posts along my property line. Standard agricultural fencing. Nothing fancy. Just enough to keep deer from snacking on the Pinot before harvest. I had sweat in my eyes and dirt under my nails when Karen swanned over in a white power suit like she was auditing heaven. That fence violates Solstice Heights aesthetic standards, she announced. Ma'am, I said, leaning on my shovel. This is a working vineyard. My family's been farming this land since before most of these houses existed. Karen's smile didn't move an inch. This is a residential neighborhood now. We have standards. That word standards dripped like oil. 2 days later, a certified letter landed on my kitchen table. Cease and desist. Unauthorized agricultural structures. Daily fines. She CC'd the county, my bank, and the local paper. That wasn't a complaint. That was a hit job with a return address. Most folks see thick envelopes and panic. Me, I make coffee, call a friend, and sharpen pencils. I'd spent 15 years in real estate law. Granddad's deed was older than most of the HOA bylaws. And I remembered enough case law to know farms like mine often carry protections that make HOAs, melt like cheap candles. I found the folder tucked where my grandfather wrote "Important Keep Forever" in his precise, arthritic handwriting. Inside a deed from the early 1960s with language about perpetual farming rights. In plain English, it meant this land was meant to stay land. I mailed a politely deadly packet to everyone. Karen copied deed excerpts, statutes, a friendly note asking the county to confirm what I already knew. A few afternoons later, a county inspector named Rodriguez dropped by. He was courteous, boots clean, clipboard ready. Got an anonymous tip, he said. We both stared at the rows of grapes, doing what grapes do, which is mind their own business. He walked the barn that predates disco, the shed Granddad rebuilt in the late 90s, the root cellar that bravely refuses to collapse. Everything passed. When he left, he shook my hand. Your exemption is ironclad, he said. Whoever's complaining doesn't understand rural zoning. I figured that would end it. It didn't. It never does with a Karen. Within a week, the HOA blasted out an emergency agenda about community beautification and agricultural eyesores that impact property values. I showed up to their community center out of pure curiosity and maybe a pinch of spite. The place smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. Karen took the front like a motivational speaker who couldn't quite motivate anyone. A couple dozen homeowners sat stiff as church pews. She clicked through a slideshow about harmony and standards, then pulled out a petition about my commercial activity. She said commercial activity like I was running a biker bar inside the barn. When they opened the floor, a retired teacher, Mrs. Patterson, stood up with her spine straight and her voice steady. Marcus's family has been here longer than some of these streets, she said. The Vineyard is the reason Solstice Valley has a name anyone knows. Others nodded. Karen's smile trembled. She tabled the item for legal review. As folks filed out, I caught her whispering with a man carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my tractor. When she saw me looking, they snapped shut like a pair of clams. That's when my stomach told me the truth. My brain already knew we weren't in neighborland anymore. We were in war. The social squeeze came next. Concerned neighbors of Solstice Valley. A Facebook group run by Guess Who blew up with pearl-clutching posts. Angled photos made my tractor look like a wrecking machine, and the normal hum of delivery trucks became dangerous traffic. People who used to wave started talking to their shoes. My banker suddenly needed extra documentation. It all felt coordinated because it was. I spent a long night at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee, a highlighter, and a stack of county records. The picture snapped into focus. Preston had been buying land low, rezoning high, and pushing out farmers who didn't know they could push back. Agricultural to residential means dirt cheap to gold-plated. My acreage wasn't just land to them, it was a jackpot. Next morning I hired a surveyor and ordered a title search that went back before color television. The results came in hot. My property line jogged deeper than anyone realized, 50 feet into the back edge of 3 HOA yards. Granddad, sly old fox, had never sold the dirt. He'd granted use and kept the ground. The report also mapped a utility easement that ran like a steel spine through the valley. Power, water, access protected by law. While I was savoring that, Karen hosted a safety meeting. She said my vineyard attracted drunk drivers, created fire hazards, probably caused swamp fever. Okay, I'm kidding on that last one. But it wasn't far off. She waved around a stack of signatures that looked suspiciously like the same pen had done them all. The me from my old life would have stood up and argued point by point. This me took notes, smiled, and let her talk. Bullies dig their own holes if you give them a shovel and a little time. Then the envelope arrived. A letter from a fancy firm embossed, gold foiled, overcapitalized, telling me to shut down all commercial operations within 72 hours. Public nuisance, traffic, noise, the works. The goal wasn't to win in court. The goal was to scare me into selling before anyone asked the right questions. Here's the thing. I couldn't afford a fight like that on paper, but I knew where to look. That night I drove to the county building, signed the after-hours log with a pen on a string, and dug through cabinets that smelled like dust and history. Ethel, the clerk, who's filed more truth than most politicians tell, watched me shuffle documents until just before sunrise. I found a misfiled record from the late 80s, a state-recognized agricultural heritage district overlay that covered Solstice Valley. In human words, before a developer so much as moved a pebble within a certain radius of heritage vineyards. They were supposed to do environmental and cultural impact studies, real ones. The sort you can't fake with a brochure and a handshake. I cross-checked permits for Solstice Heights. The studies weren't missing, they'd never existed. My stomach did a slow roll. If those houses were built without the required findings, the whole development was standing on legal quicksand. "Ethel," I said the next morning, sliding the folder across her counter. "Does this look familiar?" She adjusted her glasses, squinted, then laughed softly. "Lord, have mercy. I remember when this came through. They filed it wrong and never fixed it. Been in the wrong drawer since shoulder pads were in style." She tapped the page with a pink fingernail. "If I were a developer who ignored this, I'd be real nervous." I called Jake, old friend, environmental attorney, stubborn in all the right ways. I told him what I had. He whistled. "Mark, this is bigger than your fence. This smells like mail fraud, wire fraud, environmental violations. You sure you want to go to war?" "Buddy," I said, "they brought the war to my porch." We built a plan. Jake drafted injunctions. I retained Dr. Sarah Bennett, a soil scientist who knows a watershed like a cardiologist knows arteries. Father Miguel, yes, an actual priest who organizes farm workers and speaks fluent Righteous, offered to mobilize the valley's quiet backbone. And me, I installed cameras, bought fresh legal pads, and, slept with my boots by the door. The harassment escalated like a bad sequel. Somebody cut an irrigation line in the night clean. Deliberate. Thousands of gallons wasted. Anonymous calls spooked wedding clients. Fake reviews sprouted online like mold. Food poisoning at the tasting. Owner screamed at the bride. Lies. But lies travel faster than truth when fear holds the steering wheel. Jake obtained a temporary restraining order barring HOA agents from interfering with agricultural operations. 18 pages that boiled down to a few blessed words: "Stop poking the bear." Sarah's assessment landed like a sledgehammer: grading errors, runoff issues, contaminated groundwater. Preston's crews had carved the hillside wrong, and the valley was paying the price every time it rained. Then 3 HOA board members resigned in a week, citing ethical concerns. The ice under Karen's heels started to crack. Digging deeper, we discovered Preston was leveraged to his hairline. Construction loans ticking like time bombs. If he didn't secure new permits soon, the bank would come knocking with a clipboard and a locksmith. No wonder they wanted me gone. My vineyard wasn't an eyesore, it was an obstacle. Threats arrived in childish waves: dead fish at the gate, letters cut from magazine headlines, bogus police calls. Bear barked at shadows for a week, but we documented everything, logged every incident, and quietly shared our file with a federal agent who'd introduced himself as Rodriguez from the county. Turned out, the man had 2 badges. Karen doubled down on social media, posting like it was her full-time hobby. Dangerous chemicals, tax issues, criminal activity. The crazy burned so hot, her own friends started backing away like she was a bonfire in high wind. Meanwhile, Preston showed up at my place with a briefcase and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Generous settlement. he said. 4 million. 48 hours. He talked like a hostage trying to sell the ransom note. I told him to buy himself a conscience instead. He leaned in close. You don't know who you're messing with. I tapped the microphone tucked under my flannel. Actually, I do. He didn't get the joke yet. That night, Jake called. The state attorney general is interested. The feds are reading. We need one public moment that ties the bow. How about a community mediation, I said. Karen loves a stage. We set it for a Thursday evening in the town hall. Channel 7 parked a van out front. The room filled until the fire marshal started counting heads. The mayor took a seat in the back row and pretended he was invisible. Karen swept in wearing a suit, the color of a stop sign, and the expression of someone who expects a trophy. Preston flanked her with 2 attorneys who looked like they practiced smiling in a mirror and decided against it. Judge Patricia Wells, retired. Sharp as a tack, agreed to mediate. Let's keep it civil, she said. Karen stood first. She talked about community harmony, property values, health and safety. She waved the petition like it was the Constitution. We can't allow one man's commercial ambition to endanger our families. She finished, chin high. Preston rose next. Voice smooth as butter left on a porch in July. Compromise is the solution. I'm prepared to offer fair market value. We can resolve this today if Mr. Collins, he tossed my name like a dart, meets us halfway. Then it was my turn. I walked to the table with a folder thick enough to prop a door and laid out the story the way a surgeon lays out tools. Deeds, easements, survey maps, statutes, heritage district designations, lack of impact studies, financials that didn't add up, even with generous rounding. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The papers did the shouting for me. And one more thing, I said. The State Attorney General's office has been reviewing these materials for months. A hum rolled through the room. Federal investigators. 2. Karen laughed. A little too high. A little too sharp. He's bluffing. That's when Agent Rodriguez walked in with 2 other plainclothes officers and the kind of silence that eats noise. He nodded to Judge Wells. Then to me. People in the second row stopped breathing for a second. Preston went sheet white. One of his lawyers whispered a word that doesn't belong in church halls. What happened next was not dramatic so much as inevitable. Papers were served. Devices were collected. The cameras caught Karen's face collapsing in real time. Fascinating. Awful. Oddly sad. I felt. For a blink. Like I was watching someone finally meet the truth they'd been sprinting away from for years. I went home. Let Bear off the leash. And sat on the porch while dusk turned the vineyard into a watercolor. Sarah showed up carrying takeout and a look that said, "Eat. Then breathe." We clinked glasses and didn't say much. Some victories are noisy. That one wasn't. It was a deep, quiet exhale that had been trapped in my lungs since the first letter hit my table. 6 months later, justice didn't just knock it, unpacked, and stayed a while. Preston pleaded to federal charges that read like a grocery list of white-collar sins. Karen, who'd been the public face of the harassment campaign, earned herself a stint in minimum security and a lifetime membership in the Witnesses of Consequences Club. The judge called their scheme a systematic exploitation of farming families. Hearing that in a courtroom, with the seal on the wall and a stenographer taking it down forever, felt like a knot loosening behind my ribs. The fallout blew across the valley like a winter storm. The HOA dissolved under the weight of legal bills and moral fatigue. The half-finished cul-de-sac turned into a field again, wildflowers, where a model home sales tent used to stand. The county finalized the heritage designation with teeth this time. Not just paper. No new development without real studies. No shortcuts with smiles. The land got a seat at the table. Business. Boomed. The press loves a David and Goliath with grapevines. And Justice Valley. That's what folks started calling us. Don't look at me. I didn't coin. It became a label people recognized. Our weddings booked out to the far side of next year. The tasting room filled with neighbors who hadn't stepped foot here since Karen's Facebook sermon sent them running. They apologized. We poured. Life kept its promise. Bear got a partner, a rescue mutt with golden eyes and a nose for trouble. We named her Grace, because vengeance felt like tempting fate. Sarah moved a stack of soil journals into the farmhouse, and an extra mug into the cabinet. Turns out, love grows in good soil, and better silence. Still, I couldn't shake one thought if it happened here. It's happening somewhere else. Calls started coming from Oregon, from Texas, from Vermont. Farmers whispered versions of my story over bad reception lines. Anonymous complaints. HOA pressure. Developer connections. I told them what I wish somebody had told me earlier. Document everything. Ask better questions. Don't sign away your birthright because someone in a suit says you're being difficult. Father Miguel helped turn our weekly barn meetings into an alliance. We shared lawyers, tactics, printers, coffee. Ethel, God bless. That woman started teaching a class called Records Don't Lie in the courthouse basement. She brings donuts. Because justice works better with sugar. Once in a while, I drive the ridge road at sunset and look down at the valley. Saved and stubborn. The rows shine. The creek runs clear. The owls show up on schedule. You don't always get a neat ending. I know that. But this one landed clean. If you're listening and you've got your own HOA horror story, tell it. Put it in the comments. Send it to a neighbor. Read it to your dog, if that's where you need to start. There's people sorry. There are people who'll stand with you if you raise your hand. The bullies count on silence. Break it. That should have been the end. But greed doesn't retire. It relocates. A developer from 2 counties over started sniffing around after the headlines cooled. He wasn't dumb enough to mail threats. He bought coffee for city councilors and called it community engagement. He sponsored a charity run and called it partnership. He didn't show up at my door. He showed up at school board meetings. Sarah spotted the soil core samples stacked by his truck. They're testing upstream, she said. Her voice, half curiosity, half warning. If they cut a new road where that hillside is thin, rain's gonna take half the ridge with it. We decided to get ahead of its sunlight. Not surprise. Jake filed a public records request before anyone could invent reasons not to comply. Father Miguel convened a round table that included a fisherman who knows the creek like his own hand and a biologist who has studied our watershed since cassette tapes. Ethel, of course, knew which drawer the relevant old grant agreements lived in. The town held a forum. We didn't shout. We showed slides. Sarah talked slope stability like she was reading a bedtime story. Calm and clear. The biologist explained how salamanders tell you when a stream is happy. The fisherman told a story about an April flood from 20 years ago that nearly ate his truck. The developer's consultant clicked his pen and said, "We'll mitigate." The room, to its credit, did not swoon. I kept thinking about the first night Karen came for me, and how alone I felt sitting at that table, with the letter and the cold coffee and the dog pacing, because he could smell my nerves. This time, when the meeting ended, a dozen neighbors stayed to stack chairs. The mayor didn't pretend to be invisible. Progress is slow, but not that slow. The council voted to require full studies before they'd even consider rezoning. No studies. No vote. The developer left town the way a bad smell leaves an open window gradually. Then all at once, we threw a harvest festival the next weekend. Kids planted beans in paper cups. A string band fiddled under the oak tree like it had been born holding a bow. I grilled. Badly. And Sarah laughed every time I pretended I meant to char the sausages. Bear and Grace sprinted between the rows, drunk on freedom, and dropped snacks. Someone hung a banner that said, "Protect what feeds us." An older man, I didn't know, stood by the fence watching the line of people picking up CSA boxes like they were collecting treasure. He had hands like he'd built things, and eyes like he'd lost a few. "My father sold under pressure," he said quietly, when I passed with a tray of cups. "Slept badly for 20 years after." Seeing this, he gestured at the valley. The people. The music. Well, makes an old mistake feel a tiny bit lighter. I didn't have a speech in that moment. I just nodded, handed him a cup, and said, "You're welcome here whenever you want." Look, I'm not a hero. I'm a guy who once memorized zoning code citations to impress partners who forgot my name by lunch. I'm a man who tried being a good husband and failed, who thought fancy suits could make him bulletproof, and learned instead that life fires from angles you can't always see. I got lucky. I had the right folder, the right friends, the right clerk who remembers the drawer that swallowed a district designation 3 decades ago. But if there's anything worth hanging on your fridge from this whole saga, it's this power flexes, where it thinks people won't push back. HOAs can be great when they mow the park and keep the pool clean. HOAs turn toxic when a Karen with a title thinks other people's lives are her personal canvas. Developers build needed homes. Developers become predators when they treat communities like spreadsheets and laws like optional settings. If you're in that fight right now, here's the condensed version of what saved me. Write down everything. Dates. Times. Who said what. Screenshots are forever. Find your Ethel. Someone in your town knows which drawer the truth fell into. Don't yell when a quiet paper trail will do. Judges love calm. Get your neighbors to care about something specific. Salamanders work. So do kids' drawings of creeks. Know the law, or call someone who does. And when you don't know, say so. Don't sell your birthright for the price of a shiny car. Land remembers who loves it. Bear's asleep at my feet while I'm saying all this out loud to the kitchen. Because talking to the room is how I write, and the room doesn't talk back unless the kettle boils. Sarah's in the next room reviewing a grant proposal that would fund a program to teach high schoolers how to test the soil in their own backyards. Father Miguel texted a photo of a new coop, a farm worker cooperative, built on donated land that used to be slated for a model home. Jake finally took a week off fishing and sent me a picture of a trout holding cord in a river so clean it looks like a secret. Ethel mailed a postcard with a cartoon filing cabinet and a speech bubble that says, Check the bottom drawer. Honey. I keep the first letter Karen sent me in a frame where I can see it when I drink my morning coffee. Not because I need a villain, God knows the world has enough, or because I want to relive the adrenaline of those weeks. I keep it because it reminds me of the thin line between losing your home and finding your backbone. Between being the punchline and writing the story yourself. Between a vineyard turned into cul-de-sacs and a valley that feeds both bellies and souls. If you're still here, listening to a farmer-lawyer ramble while the sun climbs and the vines breathe, I'll leave you with this. What would you do if your HOA came for your livelihood? Would you dig in? Would you call a neighbor? Would you show up with a casserole and an open mind at the next meeting and say, "Hey, y'all, we can do better than this"? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Share the part where you thought you were alone and the part where you weren't. Someone out there needs to hear the exact sentence you're about to type. And hey, smash that subscribe if you want more HOA takedowns, small town wins, and big time bullies, learning that laws don't bend just because someone pushes. We expose suburban tyrants. Celebrate people who fight back. And try like heck to keep the land that feeds us from being paved over by people who think community is a marketing word. Because here's the secret they don't want you to know. When good people get loud with facts and neighborly with courage, the bullies always lose.